And here with me at the big table tonight is a man who knows Washington, D.C. and how U.S. policy reverberates here in Berlin and Europe. Jack Janes is Senior Fellow at the German Marshall Fund. He's also a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. Jack, it's good to have you back on the show. You just arrived a few days ago from Washington. You know policymakers, you know lawmakers here in Berlin. What are they asking or what are they saying about this impeachment inquiry in Washington?
That it's going to happen. And I think it's going to happen even by the end of this year, if not before. And largely because of what Mr. Trump said today or yesterday, asking China now to get involved in this investigation. I think he's got a problem understanding what his office is when he speaks. But there's a larger problem here, Brent, and that is governance, the relationship between the executive branch and the legislative branch. And there's a third level. And that's what I'm really concerned about. And that's the reliability of the United States. And the trust in the ability to deal with the United States without having it immersed in domestic politics.
Do you get the sense that Berlin is already preparing for a President Mike Pence?
Well, I don't think they're that far along. I mean, let's see what happens between now and the time that the impeachment process starts. The question is, who gains from that? Does he, Mr. Trump, gain as somebody who's the victim and then plays on it for his own base? Or do the Democrats win? And they have a bit of a problem because even if they go for the impeachment, they're going to have at some point pivot to the real issues on the table for everyday voters, not this. So one way or the other, this is going to be a very difficult chess game for both sides.
You know the German Chancellor Angela Merkel well. Ukrainian President Zelensky. He is quoted in this phone call transcript summary with the U.S. president, and he and Trump both, they do not say the most flattering things about Merkel or Germany's policy with Ukraine. Do you think Zelensky, has he shot himself in the foot with Germany already? Well,
look, I think he's is at the beginning of understanding what his office is as president. I mean, remember where he came from. So he's drinking from a fire hose when it comes to understanding politics, whether it's domestic or whether it's foreign. And I think that, you know, he's trying to run through an extremely tight rope here. And in that respect, I think, you know, in that case, it's best to give him time to respond to this. I mean, the fact is that this accusation that was made by Trump that Germany and Europe didn't do much for the Ukraine is false. So I think at this point, it's a real tightrope for him, and see how he can do it.
If this impeachment takes place, if the president is removed, you know, that's never happened in U.S. history. If that does happen, what's your sense for German-U.S. relations post-impeachment?
Well, that's a hard one, Brad. I mean, I think that to some extent, there were issues before Trump was elected that really shaped German-American affairs 30 years after the wall, 70 years after the founding of the Federal Republic. We celebrate that today. I think there were things that were changing anyway. And so regardless of who's going to be president and who's going to win the election in 20, I think it's going to continue to change the parameters of discussion between Berlin and Washington and the United States in general with Germany. That's not all bad. So it's a little premature to speculate about, you know, Pence or Trump or whoever the Democrat might be who might win. But either way, the environment of German-American relations is in flux.
It's in flux, and I guess the building of relationships that you see between policymakers and lawmakers, is that happening as robustly as it was, let's say, 10, 15, 20 years ago? Or do you see that being eroded?
Well, I think that there is an enormous amount of interface between the governments, and I think that there is an enormous amount of, by the way, interface between governments below the federal level. You know, they just finished this thing called Deutschlandjahr, and there was a lot of activity going on at the levels of the state and local government. So I think that we shouldn't underestimate the bonds of the countries together that have been built up over these last 7 decades, but we should not take them for granted.
Yeah. All right. Jack Janes, stand by. We're going to talk with you again in just a moment.
Polls show that 29 years after German reunification, the majority of Eastern Germans feel like second-class citizens in Germany. Fewer than 40% of Eastern Germans believe reunification was a success. Among people who are younger than 40, that figure is only around 20%. Less than half are happy with the democracy in Germany.
Yeah, sobering words there. 29 years after West and East Germany became one nation again, ending the divisions that were created by the Iron Curtain of the Cold War. Here with me at the big table is Jack Janes. He is with the German Marshall Fund. You know the German Chancellor Angela Merkel, and she came from East Germany. She has been the leader of the country since 2005, and we were doing the math today. She has been basically the leader in this country half of the time since the wall fell. How responsible is she personally for these persisting East-West differences?
I don't think she's personally responsible. I think these are relationships that are going to evolve. Willy Brandt, when it happened, said, now what can grow together should grow together. Mm-hmm. It's not going to be easy. I always make a comparison, and I hope it's not too far afield. I mean, we had a civil war between 1860 and 1865, and we're not done with that either. Mm-hmm. I mean, this takes a while, generations. So I don't put the onus on her for the kind of adjustments and changes and, quite frankly, frictions that have occurred. This is part and parcel of the price that one paid in 1989, 1990 mm-hmm. to get something that had been the goal for many, many decades.
Yeah, but you know, and when you look at the image of Angela Merkel, outside of the country, she's known as the champion of Western liberal democracy. But inside the country here, if you ask people, what does Merkel champion? Most people will tell you they don't know. She's not really known for being a champion of any cause. And since she wasn't East German, couldn't she have done more if she had made East Germans and East Germany maybe her champion as a politician?
I don't think she wanted to do that. I think from the time she was elected, she wanted to be the chancellor of all Germans. Mm-hmm. And I think that was heavy on her mind, that she shouldn't be pigeonholed.
Yeah, because she was always being measured as, is she being too much of an Aussie, as they said, right?
I mean, maybe some people in East Germany felt that wasn't enough, but my sense is that was her goal. I mean, she was given an opportunity to do something that very few leaders have ever had the opportunity to do, and that's mm-hmm. to sew two parts of a country together. I mean, even though she'd been chancellor since 2005, she was already involved in the early part of the years, and she served in Kohl's cabinet. Mm-hmm. So she saw that unfolding already right at the beginning, and I would give her credit for sustaining the dialogue. Now, whether or not she was, talking about big pictures and, the vision thing and so forth, I don't think that matters too much. I think that this was a time when there was sustainability and, to some extent, predictability. And now maybe there's a different atmosphere.
I remember covering the election victory of Gerhard Schroeder. Mm-hmm. And when he became chancellor here, and then covering when Angela Merkel became chancellor. And I mean, this was like night and day, right. The two differences here. Do you think West Germans, do they not get enough credit for, electing or accepting an East German as their chancellor, as they did in 2005, and then for keeping her in power for as long as they have?
Yeah, it's an amazing thing. She's going to probably tie Kohl's record as 16 years. And in that respect, it's almost a bit of a compliment in the sense that she did arrive at a point where people, East and West, did feel they were represented by her. Why else would she have been elected three mm-hmm. times after her first initial? And so I think that to some extent there's a great deal of accomplishment there at a time when it was turbulent. Remember, there was the recession, there was a lot of things with the euro, and then, of course, we had the migration issue. Yeah. So I think that, one shouldn't underestimate what was at stake, and at the same time, these things evolve at a certain epoch, and I think that at the end of 21 or whenever the next election is, she will be able to bow out, and I think, quite frankly, with a great deal of legacy behind her.
Let me ask you, before we run out of time, when she does step down in 2021, will that be the time that lawmakers here say, now is the time to draw the line, now is the time to declare East and West history?
No, I don't think that's going to happen. I mean, I think, as I say before, in the United States, we have great regional diversities. I think Germany has had diversities for almost the entire existence of it as a country, and even well before that.
Yep.
They shouldn't necessarily be a zero-sum game. There ought to be a way to combine the regional identities with the national identities, and maybe, of course, with the European focus.
All right, Jack James, Senior Fellow at the German Marshall Fund. Jack, as always, it's good to have you on the show. Good to hear your insights, too. Valuable stuff. Thank you, Jack.
Good to be here.